Hey, I'm excited as usual. Come to you live. Well, maybe pre-recorded, right? But I'm coming to you with another edition of Beyond Sight. And this is going to be an interesting segment. I'm gonna have a few segments that's going to really kind of fall in behind one another, building upon each segment, so you can get a better understanding. A lot of times we start dealing with things with conflict, and I've been working with couples and organizations and agencies for over 20 years now, right? Easy, right? As far as working on people who are dealing with conflict, high conflict personalities, people who just get pulled into a high conflict and what that looks like, right? And what I've come to find out during this time, and even for myself, right, is that it's not really a person having a high conflict. Uh, they don't have vision when it comes to high conflict or understanding when it comes to high conflict. What they have is an awareness issue when it comes to high conflict. And what do I mean by that? Is that when we start really looking at high conflict and people who have high conflict personalities, what tend to happen is before we start really making the adjustment to deal with it, everything kind of got larger than life at that point, right? And so that means that that person, whoever that person who has a high conflict personality, they're really disruptive. And if it's an organization, if it's in a household, a married couple, if it's friendships, or whatever it might be, when we finally start the process of dealing with it, it actually is kind of late in the game, right? It's like you're leading from behind at that point, and it's just really hard to catch up with a snowball when it really turns into an avalanche. You're really working very hard to kind of to deal with it, to really deal with it. And what I'm saying is this here is that you're not fully aware that this person or these people or this situation is a high conflict personality, or this is a high conflict situation going on. And the awareness piece too is that we don't know how to deal with it, right? I'm not aware of how to manage this situation, how to manage the emotional output. A lot of times when we start dealing with stuff, we're really dealing with it from a emotional translated position. And what I mean by that is this here. We have this thing called the negative feedback loop, right? And what that negative feedback loop is saying is that one, I've seen something or I've heard something, something that I observed, something that I heard. Two, I'm translating what I've seen and what I've heard. Three, I'm attaching an emotion to it. And four, which it should be four, but four is what really happens. People react. They don't respond. They react to the emotional translated piece. They're really reacting to the emotion, right? But there's a fifth. Well, that should be five. We probably would make five different because the fourth element is that they don't really get the clarity, and that's where the awareness piece come in. That they don't get the clarity about what it is that they know, what it is they're seeing, what it is they heard. They really just attaching emotion. So everybody really just working off emotion. Somebody with a high conflict personality thrives on you being emotional, right? They thrive on taking you out of your orbit, getting into their orbit, and then just got everybody disruptive. They come in with the idea of disrupting, right? If it's an organization, if you're at work, how many of us been at work and know that person who has this disruptive personality. We might call them, man, they always into drama. They love drama. They always got something going on. How many of us really have see that and can identify a person who's like that? I don't want you to go around saying, I know that person there, and I don't want you pointing at nobody and whatnot, right? But we know that that exists. And we also know that it exists even within our households, right? When we are then looking at a wife who is always maybe claiming victim or always, shifting blame or a husband who's very doing something, because all women don't do it and not all men do it. Men and women do it, right? They have these personalities that they can't accept accountability, can't accept something. They get to kind of point out that you the one who's wrong and I'm the only one who's right. And really, that is a person who's dealing with high conflict personality. A person that believes that they are always right is a person who has high conflict personality, high conflict personality, right? And how many of us know that person? That person, you say, man, you always think you're right about everything. And I know I've pinpointed. Heck, I don't even have people say that to me once upon a time, right? That I felt like I felt like I was right about everything, right? And I've been right about a few things. I've been wrong about a few things, right? And I've learned over the years and really concentrating my efforts in high conflict decoding and de-escalating, right? I've learned a lot about myself in that and how I then want to make sure that I'm not being disruptive. And sometimes I've been blamed for being disruptive, right? Not necessarily. I've been known to say, I'm not wearing all that, right? Because sometimes you have to stand up for that which is true. And sometimes it's going to be for you and it's going to be against you, right? And you have to be able to sit in your discomfort with that and learn how to manage yourself in that to kind of be the best person that you can possibly be. And that's okay, right? That's okay. We can learn how to do something different. We can learn how to be better. But we got to be aware though. And that's the first step in anything, awareness. Awareness is basically saying knowledge on a situation, right? We got to have knowledge on a situation. And because knowledge is going to be what actually help us squash this stuff, right? I want to say suppress because I don't think nothing ever needs to be suppressed, right? Because if something is suppressed, at some point it's going to pop off, right? The more you keep trying to put it, it's going to be up under pressure. The more you suppress it, the more pressure is going to be up under. And then sometimes pressure pops, right? And so we have to be aware of not just suppressing a situation, but actually managing how to deal with it so we can come with resolutions or solutions to be able to live a peaceful life, right? Exist, not just coexist, but exist. I mean, we don't say coexist, but truly exist with each other in some type of harmonious way, right? That's the vision here. This is when we start looking at getting beyond that whole idea of what it is that we see. And this is when we start talking about beyond sight. It goes beyond what I'm just seeing right here, because at some point, your eyes can fool you. People tend to trick you based upon what it is. They give you the whole illusion of something to make you look this way when they're actually going this way. Right? That's the trick. And it's serious. And the person who shows up with high conflict personality, these traits, they actually know what they are doing. It's not a haphazard thing that they are really focusing with or playing with. It's not just by happenstance that they're doing something. No, they seriously understand what it is that they are doing. They are aware. They don't want you to be aware. And that's going to stop with us now, right? So for that person who is starting stuff on the job, how do we train and teach people how to deal with it? What we have been accustomed to doing is we've been conditioned to react to everything from an emotional standpoint. Right? Everything is deeply emotionally pulled, different deep emotions. If it's avoidance, if it's talking loud, trying to address a situation, if it's a fight or if it's an argument or it's a shelling up or clamming up, all that's emotion. Every piece of that is emotion. And I'm not saying that we have to really be in a position of just denying the emotions of stuff, right? We're not robots. And none of us are robots. None of us are AI. None of us are anything. We don't just something feed in and then we just push out what we've been fed. That's not it. We are perfectly human with all the perfections and the flaws that comes with being a human, right? But we can be better humans, right? And that's the idea. It's always reaching for that top shelf. I was having a conversation with somebody the other day. Right, it's funny because I don't drink. I haven't had a drink or did any type of intoxicant in over 40 years, right? And but I'm not going to act like I'm not aware of something saying going to a liquor store, right? Or going somewhere and on the top shelf, right? It's all the top stuff, that's why they call it the top shelf. That's all the premium stuff is up there, right? Well, I don't want you looking reaching for the premium liquor, right? But I'm saying most things that's on the top has the better quality to it. If you're looking at a tree with fruit on it, if you're looking at an apple tree or something nature there, the top of that tree, that's where they get all the sun and all that everything up there. That's the better fruit than the thing that's hanging at the bottom, right? The low hanging fruit, right? We're getting tired of dealing with low hanging stuff, right? How can we have ourselves or get ourselves to moving in a position, in a direction that's good, and taking the people who are with us along with us, right? How do we change the culture of if it being on the work on the job site, is being on in your organizations, your place of worship or wherever that might be, or that's in your home, dealing with your family and things of that nature. How do we then make sure that the people that comes in contact with us are trying to reach for the top shelf, right? That's what I look at doing, and for the most part, the people who I come in contact with, this is what happens with them. Nobody really stays at the bottom rung of anything when they dealing with me, right? And I'm not to say that I'm just this ooey person, but okay, yeah, I'm this ooey person. Okay, you want to say that, right? But no, I just have a standard. I understand now the standard of I have to be better than you because I'm reaching for the top. I don't have to be better than you if I am looking for something beyond what it is that I see. I don't get tricked because to an extent, I'm sad that I lost my eyesight, but I'm also content with the loss of my eyesight. Why? It's because I don't get tricked in just the beauty of something, the mirage of something. And that's the hocus pocus that get played, even with people who have high conflict personality. They tend to leave you at the surface, and this is how they reel you in because you don't go deeper. If you went deeper, they would leave you alone. They get away from you, or they try to poison the well around you, right? And that's what happens. That has happened to me, right? Because he couldn't get at me, he tried to poison people who are around me, right? And so until I was able to then learn how to communicate, even with the people who are around me. But I had a friend once, and everybody knows of my stint of my incarceration. So I had a friend one time, he's no longer with us now. He's deceased now. And he was still in prison when he passed away. He passed away from a heart attack. The guy was only 36 years old. Stress killed him, right? And I was out at the point, and he had got sent back. He had a life sentence. He got sent to a halfway house. So what happened is it was a counselor there at the place we was at. And he and I didn't get along at all, right? He had some lifestyle choices that, of course, I don't agree with. And, I don't agree with it, And so he felt like something was wrong with me because I didn't agree with him, right? He had a lifestyle, that wasn't my lifestyle, right? And so he could never get at me because one thing about it too, because he's just called a big shot around there, as a counselor. He was just a counselor. But he always tried to act like he was running something. He always whatever. But I didn't go for it. I didn't when I was around him, I didn't laugh when it wasn't funny. I didn't scratch when it didn't itch. I didn't step and I didn't fetch with him. I didn't kiss his behind. I cared nothing really. I cared nothing about him, right? And that's because we had two different values. So I really didn't care much about him, right? But I ain't trying to give him a hard time. He was an employee. I was incarcerated. So I also understood my place in the situation too, right? But yet still, because I'm in this position, don't mean I let you run roughshod over me, right? Just gotta know who you are. Right? That was one thing. I think that's something that I've been able to realize about myself. I kind of know who I am, right? And I get to learn more about me every day, right? I'm not scared of learning about these new things about me. Even as I age, I learn more about myself even as I age. But part of the story here is that he tried to poison a well with a friend of mine. And so he came out the guy's office and he saw me. And I could see in his face that he didn't, whatever just happened in that office, it had to do something with me, right? It had to do a lot with me. And I saw him and he saw me and then he kind of like gave me his look and he just kept going. And I'm like, I'm not one who, you know, I don't believe confrontation has to be ugly. I just believe people need to be able to talk to one another, right? And so I caught up with him. I said, "Hey, man, what's up?" You know. And so he was like, "Nah, nah." He was hemming and hawing a little bit. And so what I understood without him telling me at that time is that dude really just ate my back out. You know what I mean? He just really just trashed me with this guy, right? And it made it like he was going to be in some type of trouble at this place if he was dealing with me, right? And so, of course, I'm like, man, look, you know me. You know what I do around here for people. You know how I help people around here. How at this point, I'm just going to be honest with you, I did their job. I kept a lot of confusion down at this space, right? At this place. I kept a lot of people from getting in trouble and all this other type of stuff here, right? People would come to me, right? And I've always had that ability, and I thank God for that, right? I've already had the ability to kind of work with people, right? I mean, before the term OG really came out, I was working on this type of status, right? I just know who I am, right? And so when I finally got to talking to him and having a communication, I then got him to see how he is trying to divide. And he was another brother too at this time too, And again, he was Muslim as well. And he passed away, and I was able to get him buried as a Muslim, and I was thankful for that. But he was a good guy. He was a good guy. But I'm like, this guy's trying to come in between us, our community. This guy go home and does whatever he wants to do with his people and all that type of stuff, man. But we here, actually, me and this guy came to the place together, right? He and I came there together, right? I had to get him to see that he was exhibiting a high conflict personality, because one of the things, he was trying to manipulate him against me, right? Someone that he lives with at this point, because we're there together. You're incarcerated, you actually living together. You're in the same environment together. We live here. And this guy goes home. I'm trying to get him to see, look, man, this isn't our way. And I didn't hold anything against him. And he really kind of like, Clay, man, you're right, man. Because that dude, man, then he told me everything that the dude said about me, right? Well, I already knew the guy didn't like me. I already knew some of the things he had against me, right? But then he just told me everything, foolish in him. He done told this dude everything, how he felt about me. And the dude just told me everything what he said, right? So, for me, forewarned is forearmed, right? And so now I really know where he's coming from. He don't really know my position. He knows my position, but he don't. But I know all of his position. But I had to kind of talk to my friend to let him know, this guy, man, is trying to manipulate you against me. So therefore, he isolates me from having companions here, right? And that's what someone with high conflict personality would do. You see somebody on a job, they try to run people against a certain person. They have a whole campaign against a person on the job. And if you don't have the awareness of being able to peep that and being able to how to function within that, they are banking on you to not be aware, for you to wear your emotions on your sleeve, for you to be that gullible. And they are banking on that. If it's administrations, if it's management, if it's husbands, if it's wives, if it's children, if it's siblings, whatever it might be, the person who has a high conflict personality traits, those people have that traits, they are really looking for you not to dive deep into anything, right? Because if you dive deep, what you're going to do is you're going to make sure that you keep them isolated from you. You keep them separate from you. You're going to back away from them. And that they need you in order to survive. If they don't have anywhere where they conflict, if you see someone who has high conflict personality, if they can't get a person to get on their in their team or in their squad or be on their side, what they do, you see them, they'll quit a job, they'll quit a relationship. They will get, because they have no way of succeeding in what it is that they do. They have no way of surviving, because their symptoms needs to live. And if you aren't able to then just kill their symptoms by not participating with them, then they'll get away from you. If you are a person who's a manager in an organization or a corporation, and you have these type of people here, and you start educating the people around you who work with you on not just that person itself, because I never want to see a person then just ostracize an individual. We need to ostracize the behavior, right? We need to isolate the behavior. right? Now, the person who's exhibiting that behavior, because they want that behavior to live, they're going to get away from you. They're going to go somewhere where they know that behavior can live. They'll quit. They'll quit without even giving you a resignation. They'll leave without even telling you that they're all of a sudden they're up and gone. They put their plan together just to up and leave, right? They'll walk out the door and they're gone. And you see it, and you see it's happening. They know you see it happening, but they're banking on you not to call it out so they can go, right? But if you calling out the behavior, there's nothing they can do about it. So I want everybody who's checking out this podcast to know that when you're dealing with someone who has high conflict personality traits, right? And whatever those traits might be, if it's narcissistic traits, if it's antisocial traits, is some type of personality traits, right? Personality disorder traits, right? We're not saying they have these personality disorders. We are understanding that they have the traits of some of these personality disorders. Some people quick to scream out, narcissism, right? It's like everything is narcissistic nowadays, right? But narcissistic traits, is probably more prevalent than the narcissistic personality disorder, right? So let's make sure that y'all understand that people have these traits, but they're not exhibiting the disorder itself. And when you start mislabeling things based upon your emotional drive, if you will, then they're winning, because what you have effectively done is not really call them to the table, because you have mislabeled them. They can make you look like something wrong with you because they got you all emotionally tied up and wrapped up, and then now you look like the person who's crazy, who looks foolish, look like you're disruptive, and all this old type of stuff here. And what happens is you start isolating yourself, or you start having, if you're on a job, you start having misery on a job. You don't want to go to work. You don't want to work there anymore. If you're in a relationship, you don't know you want to leave the relationship. You don't know what you want to do with that, right? And it's unfortunate that we live in a society that really capitalize on our ignorance of a situation, right? If it's politics, if it's anything on television, whatever it might be, there is this appeal to your emotions, not your intellect, but your emotions, not your rationale, but your emotions. There is this appeal, being on the internet or anywhere else, there's this appeal to get at your emotions. You got a multi-billion-dollar industry, I don't care what industry it is, that capitalize on getting at your emotions, right? But to some degree, I'm tapping into some of your emotions right now myself. But I want your emotions to be capped with knowledge, and then top that even with wisdom, right? So, because you're going to have emotions, but the emotions shouldn't trump your knowledge. That should be guided by wisdom, right? If we are able to do that, then we kind of got this game lit. And if more of us are doing it, that means that we can change the culture of things. And the culture is one person at a time. It's one person. Stuff like this podcast, Beyond Sight, is where we can start. It's somewhere where we can start. But we have to, the only way we get there is by educating ourselves, right? That's going to be the key. So I'm looking forward to being able to have these type of conversations, giving this type of information. By all means, you know, and if you're on this, you're checking me out on YouTube. By all means, please drop a line and let us know how you may have even been caught in a situation. And I don't want you to be too personal if you don't feel like it, and you can do it anonymously if that's how you want to go, or you can send it to me in my inbox, and I can clip it and post it if you like it to be posted, and we can make it anonymous. So not to give any details about who you are, right? Because people still have the right to be, even though they want to share, they still have the right to be private, right? And I want you to feel safe in your privacy, being vulnerable enough to communicate and share. But even in that, I want you to feel safe in your sharing, right? Because here's the thing I also know about people. We've been clocked to share. Even those who say, oh, I ain't getting into this. And even when they're saying that, they're sharing. You can't get around sharing. Somebody saying, I don't really get into that internet stuff. I don't really be sharing, doing this and this. If they're telling you that, they're actually sharing at that moment, right? So we just naturally clocked to share, right? How much we share is one thing, but we're naturally clocked to share. We're naturally clocked to have companionship, to be able to confide in somebody, even when, the most cockiest, a confident person that you can believe a person can be, they still want to share. Can't get around human makeup, right? But we can also feel safe as somebody in knowing that somebody is not manipulating our situation or stroking our ego to kind of, you know, handle us, because that also happens too. Somebody stroke your ego, the only thing they're doing is trying to handle you. They know what they're doing when they kind of putting you on pedestals and propping you up and all this other type of stuff here and there. There's still high conflict personalities at work, believe it or not, even when it looks like somebody is overpraising you, right? That's high conflict personality still at work, right? There's something that they're looking for in that. So, by all means, yeah, this is going to be, I am excited. I'm excited. I'm excited about this direction that Beyond Sight is going. I'm beyond excited, right? I'm loving this direction. I want you to share this in this with me. So, how you can check me out. Of course, every Monday at 7 p.m. Look for us on YouTube, right, at the Hasan Clay Experience. Um, Also on Facebook at Hasan Clay. Also sharing there as well. The video goes up there. And also check me out on TikTok and Instagram at the Hasan Clay Experience, right? And I think it's something like the Hasan Clay _ experience, or the Hasan Clay dot whatever experience. Just put Hasan Clay Experience in that, and it'll come up, I'm sure, right? And let's connect. Let's make this thing happen. I promise we're gonna learn, we're gonna grow, we're gonna make it better, and we're gonna make it better one person at a time. Even if right now the people who we have surrounding us, if only they get better, then that means our circle gets better, because our inner circle gets better. That means they take that to their kids and they teach their kids this, or their friends and they teach their friends this, right? It starts with one person, and that thing spreads out like wildfire at some point, right? And it's not about, a zillion views and all this other type of stuff. Man, I would love to go viral, right? But if I got 10, 15 people, whatever, I'm gonna tell you, those people who share that, if they in there and they putting it into their community, that's how we can actually expand this information, this knowledge, and this approach and this movement that we have in high conflict decoding and de-escalating, right? Because we got to get better because people are feeding off of us. So 7 p.m. every Monday, by all means, please check me out. Set your notifications for that. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. And by all means, to comment on some of this stuff. Even if you just say and agree, hey, Brother Clay, what's up? Brother Hasan, what's going on? What's up, sir? I guess some people, they got this movement out there. They call everybody sir now. It seems like, hey, sir, all that. I thought that's the funniest thing I ever seen in my life, right? But, you got people who are doing that. And so that's cool, right? If that's how you want to address it. What's up, whatever, that's cool. I got no problem with it, right? And we're going to learn how to make sure that we make this thing happen, especially as men. I'm always talking to my brothers first, then to our sisters after that. Talk to my sisters as well, Muslim, non-Muslim, doesn't even matter how you show up, whatever your religious expression. One thing about it, the enemy is trying to get us all right? Don't care what your claim is. Don't care what your set is, right? Don't care where you work. Don't care about your social economic status. Don't care about your demographic. Don't care if you living in Buckhead or Bankhead, right? Don't care. The enemy does not care, right? So with that, I want everybody to make sure that, you tune in every Monday at 7 p.m. And by all means, please share, comment, share. All right, y'all take care. I love everyone. Again, it's beyond sight. We're looking at this thing further than what our eyes can see, right? And so with that, y'all take care. Y'all have a great night and have a beautiful weekend.